morning. Welcome to the Idaho Federation of Families parent webinar for the month of November. We're doing this in collaboration with the Dept Youth Empowerment Services system of care that's run through the Division of Behavioral Health, and also with the parent network here in Idaho as we have a parent that joins us. So our focus this morning is on the various systems that are involved in the YES system of care and what those different agencies do as children and families come in and touch those agencies. So before I introduce the group that we have with us, a couple of things to pick up on is one is to let you know that there are an opportunity to ask questions. You'll see a Q&A area if you are watching this through Zoom, so please ask any questions. There's also the chat room. So use the chat room if you want to have kind of some conversations back and forth, sharing information. But if you want a question, please make sure that you put it through the Q&A. That way we're able to track it and make sure the answers are given back to you. We also have surveys that are going on. We're going to do a parent survey at the very end just to get some information about the information that was provided to you, what you would like to see in the future. These are directed to parents. So we are looking for, this is a parent webinar, and it's the information that we are looking for in terms of what we want to do next, what the parents feel like the information was valuable to them. So we know we have a lot of professionals that are also watching, but we are asking at the very end that the surveys be done by the parents only. And we also want to say everybody is welcome. We are glad to have anybody and everybody who's watching this morning. The content is really pretty much geared towards the parent, caregiver, family type population. So for some of the professionals, the information may be things that you are already familiar with. So just know that when we do it, we're really trying to provide information to those that are new touching the system, that are just trying to figure out how to navigate, who's involved. So again, everybody is welcome. We're glad to have you here, but just know that we are looking more towards getting information to the families. If anybody's on YouTube, we have polls that we'll be putting up throughout the presentation. Unfortunately, through YouTube, you're not going to be able to get through those. You can only do those if you're on the Zoom site. And I think with that, I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. To my left, I have Ross Edmonds, who is the Division Administrator for the Division of Behavioral Health, and Janet Hecky, who is the parent representing the Parent Network, and Chris Palmer, who is the Assistant Probation Division Manager for Ada County, and Misty Myatt, who is the Workforce Training and Development Program Specialist. And kind of, if you just go around real quick and just give us a quick snippet, what is it that you do and how does it relate to the YES system of care and kind of what we're talking about?
Sure, yeah. Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Ross Edmonds again. I'm the administrator for the Division of Behavioral Health. In that capacity, I operate Idaho's adult mental health services, children's health services, substance use disorder services, and I also operate our 2 state psychiatric hospitals in Alpena and Blackwood. Happy to be here.
And I'm Janet Hecky. I am a parent of a child with a serious emotional disturbance, and I've been working with the Parent Network for about 3 years now, just helping add parent voice to the development of the system.
My name is Chris Palmer. I'm the Assistant Probation Division Manager for Ada County Juvenile Probation. I oversee 5 supervisors and 40+ probation officers that basically handle all types of cases that come in from diversion level to court investigations to actual field cases.
Good morning, my name is Misty Myatt. I'm the Workforce Training and Development Program Specialist for the Department of Health and Welfare with Child and Family Services. I've been employed with child welfare for the past approximately 10 years. I worked in the field as a safety assessor, as a supervisor, and now overseeing the child welfare academy.
So one of the things that I think is really helpful today is in bringing in both juvenile justice and child and family services,
Child and family services.
Okay. Is that often that parents may touch your systems and not be aware of services that may be available through the new youth empowerment services. So I think having the conversation together is, what does it look like when families are coming, hitting the systems at different places? How do those systems interact with each other? What is being built? It may not be in place right now, but it's like, what is the vision going forward of how the systems are going to collaboratively work together to support families with kids that have a severe emotional disturbance. So right off the bat, and I think having Ross here is really, really helpful and powerful because he understands what the whole vision is, So I think in coming back sometimes and go, what are we looking at down the road? This is what we may have right now. This is the way it's working. But what are we looking for in the future? So what do parents need to be asking for? To find out when are things available, when are things going to happen, and what do they know that, really is going to be eventually there for their families. So real quickly, can you just Misty, what does it look like when a family of a child with a severe emotional disturbance ends up at your all's doorstep? What might be the circumstances that they would be there?
Sure. So we have a centralized intake unit, which is the client that receives calls regarding child abuse or neglect. They're staffed 365 days a year for 24 hours a day. They often will receive calls from community members, educators, service providers that may already be working with families, or oftentimes even juvenile probation, who are concerned about the safety of children. When those calls are received, the information is reviewed to make sure it meets our priority guidelines. And then after we make a determination that it does in fact meet those priority guidelines, we assign it to a child welfare social worker to go out and complete an assessment on the victim. Typically, they will go to the school and interview children. And oftentimes, depending on if the information is considered to be an imminent threat, they will work then in collaboration with law enforcement to make that determination. Or they'll continue on with their assessment and gather information from schools, from parents, from other community providers and service providers if the children are already.
So Misty, could someone show up at a school and interview my child and I wouldn't know it?
Best practice is that you would know. However, there are definitely circumstances where our child welfare workers respond immediately and do go and interview children at school. There is an expectation that parents are notified as soon as possible.
And is FACS the group that does that notification?
Correct.
So the family would receive a phone call saying someone is going to show up, and if the child, so there's a lot of children, and I think this is one of the areas for parents that is probably the most terrifying for us when we know we have a child with a mental health disorder. It frequently is misinterpreted by people in the community who don't understand mental health disorders as being an abusive issue or question it, right? So when I hear you say, gosh, someone could show up at the school and interview my child without me present, or we have a lot of families that they homeschool for the very same reason that it's just difficult within the school system. What does that look like for a parent? Like what kinds of things are they asking our children, and do we have the right to be there when they're asking our children, or?
So it really depends on the circumstance, right, around the regarding the questions and what the child welfare workers are asking. Best practice is when somebody responds to a school, that they would talk to either the counselor or principal or even perhaps a child's teacher and ask, are there some certain things that I should know going into this and gather some additional history. Parents, we oftentimes ask that they are not involved in those interviews. Again, the interviews are to establish a sense of safety and well-being for that kiddo. And there's some concerns that kiddos might not always be so forthright with parents in the room. And also there's a liability issue that becomes involved. So we hesitate to have paraprofessionals, teachers, or other school administrators involved in those interviews as well. That opens up to a lot of other information that could potentially leak stuff.
Okay, that's it. It's a pretty scary thing, I think, for a lot of parents. So just maybe to help parents understand a little bit, when I hear you talking, I think about, okay, so they're imminent danger, right? So that would be more maybe a case where somebody observed something or that they thought would be that the child might be in imminent danger from their parents. But there are other cases that someone might contact FACS. Or could you just maybe go in a little bit to like the range of things that you see FACS called for, so that parents can maybe understand a little bit better what the range of things are, because it's not always going to be that the child is in imminent danger.
Sure. So when I think about the reference and purpose of this webinar, one of the things that comes to mind is perhaps when a child is having perhaps some behaviors and a parent may have to restrain them. And that restraint may cause some injuries to the child, which then maybe the child will go to school and the teacher would say, "Oh, Johnny, you have a bruise. What happened?" "Well, mom hit me." And so then, because that teacher is a mandated reporter, they would call in to us and we would go out and do an assessment. And again, we're collaborating with the school professionals and then ask, what's going on with Johnny? Can you tell me more? Has he been in? Does he have any mental health diagnosis, any developmental disabilities that we should know of? And really try to get a comprehensive assessment of what occurred and what we can do to help support the parents in either receiving services or going back at those services to see how they can be of an additional support. Does that help?
It does a little. I think it's one of those things that parents are naturally. I mean, anytime we're talking about juvenile justice or about facts, it's one of those situations where families who haven't touched that system are pretty terrified of what it looks like because of the risk to themselves and to their family. There are a lot of families out there that have a child with a mental health disorder that the response that they perceive is going to happen is that FACS is going to come in and take the children who don't have the mental health disorder away and leave the child that does. And I think that's one of those situations. I don't know, maybe you all have far more experience. I am a parent of a child with a mental health disorder and a developmental disability, but that's not something that I ever have been through. So I just think as a parent, I'm trying to think of what would I feel like, right?
Yeah, and so the Department of Health and Welfare has a responsibility to provide reasonable efforts for families. So in that, our goal is to ensure that families can provide for their children and that their children can remain in homes with their families. So that is our first and foremost goal. It is not removal. So if there's anything that we can do to prevent removal, we have a federal and an ethical responsibility to provide those services and work with those families prior to removal.
What I want you to say is loop back to you and ask you kind of what parents can do proactively to be ready if they anticipate that, at some point in time, they may get a telephone call. Because we have talked to some parents that kind of were like, they knew exactly what to do. And it was less scary when they walked into it, a little more prepared. So we'll loop back to that in a second. And with what Jan's talking about is that we have been in rooms with like large groups of parents who have kids with really serious mental health disorders. And it's a very real thing. So it may not always be actually the way it works, but it's the perceived sense that they have. So it's kind of trying to dispel that. And that's what the intention of this right now is to kind of dispel some of that and let them know, these are the steps that happen. Here are ways that you can jump in, how you can be prepared for things instead of having such a defensive mode that parents often respond in. So I think it's that give and take with the system, understanding where the parents are coming from, and the parents really understanding what the obligations of the system are.
Can I just make a comment? So first and foremost, a worker from child welfare, in fact, can't take a kid into custody. That's law enforcement's job, a judge's job, right? So they're doing an investigation. They're really good at doing those investigations. They've done this many, many times. They look at all the dynamics of the situation. They're certainly going to talk to the family. They're certainly going to talk to the kids. But it's law enforcement that places the kid into custody. What I see most often is, what I was going to say is that they have a legal mandate to ensure the child's safe. And so that's what they're trying to do. And sometimes that gets a little sideways in a situation where a child has a serious emotional disturbance, where you can't really filter out all the dynamics of what's happening in the family. The parents are just working really, really hard to try to help their child, but their child's violent. And sometimes from the outside, people don't know what that looks like.
Right.
So, from my perspective, child welfare is really another door into help. It's another opportunity. And I think sometimes we can look at it that way as opposed to being scared. And sometimes I think from families' perspective, they get threatened. Mm-hmm. Systems threaten them with that. Child protection that's not what they're about. They're not there to receive these threats and to do, to be a big scary entity that goes in and takes kids. They're there to help, just like anybody else. First and foremost, take care of the kid, make sure they're safe. But we hear about those circumstances where, a parent says, I can't take my child home.
Right.
Right? They're at a hospital or they're in residential care or they're somewhere, and it's unsafe for me to bring them home. And so then you hear these threats about, then we're going to charge you with child abandonment.
Right.
When Child and Family Services gets involved, they're going to look at all the dynamics. They're going to understand that situation. So I think parents shouldn't be initially like, oh my gosh, something's legal and I have to meet. Work with the system, give us a call, talk to their child welfare worker that's involved. There's usually really good ways to work through that, even though it's scary. And I just wish that wasn't a part of what we have to deal with in this system. But it's multiple sections of the system that we're getting better at working together with.
So with that, how with the new system of care, will some of that change? How does YES interact or kind of collaborate with Child and Family Services so that families who do have a child with severe emotional disturbance, that there may not be as many calls or things like that? Is there something that's going to happen with system change that will see a different dynamic?
Yeah, well, first, I don't know that it's possible for us to create a system that's going to change people misunderstanding situations. Right. We're certainly not going to contact, we're not going to change every teacher and every community member and all that. But I think what we can do is to really work very closely with child welfare, and that's what we're doing now, is to create multiple pathways. Same thing with juvenile justice. Working with great people like Chris and his staff to understand how for them to have a tool available and to be able to access services to help their kids, because they're in the same exact situation. They just want these kids to get help. So I think the system's evolution, you'll see much, much more collaboration between the systems. I think we've done a good job. We've done a really good job in certain pockets.
Yes.
Chris and his staff do an excellent job. There's probably still some places in the state where juvenile justice, children's mental health, child protection don't have as good a collaboration, and we're working on it.
So jumping into that, so Chris, same question. So when, and again, specific to a family that has a child with severe emotional disturbance, what does it look like when they touch your system? And what are the steps they kind of go through?
I think that what Misty and Ross were saying is true. It's hard to give a definitive because there are so many different factors and so many levels that happen. Of course, I think everybody understands that the first interaction starts with law enforcement. Law enforcement goes and takes a report. The parents should always know that that's happened. By the time that report goes, it usually will go to our prosecutor's office. Our prosecutor then screens those reports. I think that, and again, there's a lot of misnomers out there about how we get all the way to court. There are a lot of cases where our prosecutors look at those and they realize some of the dynamics, and they might choose to go an alternative route like diversion and looking at informal ways of trying to get help for the families. And ultimately, the juvenile justice system, that's what our goal is. Our goal is we base everything on a balanced approach, but our real focus is to provide that support and use that balanced approach to be able to develop competencies within parents. Yeah, we want to do accountability, but we want to educate. We don't want kids to remain in the system. And I think that that's one of the big things is that the systems with the public defenders, the prosecutors, and our judges, we want to try to find the best ways to get the families the help that they need so kids don't stay in. If a kid does end up going to sentencing and then is placed on probation, our goal is, through our court investigations process, is to really work with our partners and gather as much information so that judge can develop the best set of orders or a case plan for that client. Our goal, again, is to find services. It's not to be punitive. And I think that when we start looking at how we interact, I think a lot of that, and Ross touched upon it, is the system's not perfect. But I think that we have made such strides in the past even 10 years of getting to where we're sitting down at tables and we're collaborating with the parents there saying, what do you need? And one of our biggest hurdles is demystifying what each one of our roles are. And I think that that's where we run into issues, is that parents are fearful. And I think they're fearful of not only our system, but is child protection or family and child services going to take my child away? children's mental health. Are they really trying to help my kid? Are they trying to hurt my kid? I think when we've had parents sit down and had everybody around that and given them the time to ask those questions and to vent that fear, we have been very successful. And we've had a lot of kids that have come into the system and left the system, but are continuing to work with our partners once they leave. And I think that that's really what our goal is again, increase that communication.
So what is that opportunity that you're talking about to bring parents together where you're sitting down with them and you're bringing the other partners to the table? Is that a specific type of?
It's called a court multidisciplinary team. And I think I can speak pretty confidently for all of the counties that they pretty much have different variations of that where it's this mandate or this belief that, you know what, we can't do this alone. We want to make sure that we get people in child and family services. We want to get children's mental health. We want to get, and I talked earlier off camera about developmental disabilities, getting all of these partners together so that we're not just playing telephone and relaying information, but that they can talk to somebody firsthand and exchange a phone number and go, hey, come up with some more questions, give me a call. And it's at these court multidisciplinary teams where really good case management happens because we all leave there with an agreement. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, and we're all working for the benefit of that family and that child.
I imagine, Chris, you've seen the pendulum swing. We have been at times where it's been a more punitive system, but really we're in a balanced place right now, I think, with all of our systems. The system isn't set up to be punitive to kids, certainly isn't set up to be punitive to families. You might see pockets of that around. Right. Some people still are old school about that, but really there's a recognition, I think, by all of our systems that if we choose to be on opposite sides as families, we're not going to make progress. If we choose to work collaboratively with families and actually try to help them and support them, that's when, because ultimately we're all about outcomes. We want the best outcome for that kid and the best outcome for that family. And if what we're doing is staying on opposite sides and talking at each other and not working together with one another, we're not going to have as good outcomes. We're just not. So I think it's really been it's that pendulum swing, and it's gone too far this way sometimes and too far this time. And I think it's kind of in a nice place right now with the development of, all of the changes that have occurred under Chris and his leadership and folks like him from around the country or around the state, from the child welfare system. It's getting looked at really closely right now, recognizing this stuff and how the need is there to just be really collaborative. We're one team. And if we're one team, that's how we're going to make the most progress.
Well, and it's a pretty big philosophical shift. And I think, like you said before, there's pockets of places that are really grabbing it, embracing it, and be it from top down, and others that it's taking a little longer for it to filter out and to become part of how they need to interact. One of the things I'm curious with is the concept of bringing everybody together and working collaboratively is great, but I still think for parents coming to the table when all of a sudden you've got all these professionals there. So what do you all do to help a parent be prepared and to understand the importance and value of their voice so they really can participate at the level that you need to have them there?
I can tell you, and you're right, there is probably nothing more intimidating than sitting down at a large table and having all these people around and everybody introduces themselves and you sit there and you're like, I'm a parent and my kid has got problems, but I'm worried about you judging me, I think that how we try, and I don't think we ever 100% alleviate that, but we always have with our probation officers, they're usually the ones that will schedule this. Our judges sometimes order that these happen. But we try to meet and make sure that we talk to the parent and we try to get them to the best of our ability to understand that, this is to help them. And most of the parents that come and sit down at those tables, they're exhausted. They are tired. And they have been through so much and they have probably received a runaround in certain areas. To actually sit down and be able to get that piece together and to have one place where they get every question answered is huge. But it is
questions. We have one.
How does school play a part in this team? Our district doesn't accept outside contracts for CBRS.
So I think the way schools, as best we can, and I think you all are scheduling another one of these for January, in which you're going to have somebody from the State Department of Education, Dr. Silva, will be here. She'd be great to answer these questions. But really, the schools, I think all of us look at this. I mean, there's a reason we talk about schools. That's where kids are. It's oftentimes that's the center of our communities, right? So engaging schools, having them a part of these teams is so critical. I mean, one of your probation officers is going to see a kid maybe intensively once a week, maybe once a month if they're a little less acute. A counselor is going to see a kid once, twice a week for an hour. A school teacher is going to see them 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. We have to engage the schools. We have to engage the education system in this across the board. So I think, the multidisciplinary teams that you're talking about, I don't think that they can require teachers to be a part of that. We have some teams, but I know you guys do the best you can to try to engage the education system.
We actually have a pretty good turnout when we request or even pass the information along to schools, and we try to, especially if the behaviors are in the school, try to get them involved. And we have a lot of teachers and administrative staff that are willing to take time out of their day to come there. And again, they're taking time away from all the kids to come and deal with one, and that shows me that they have a vested interest in that. They want that kid to be successful, and usually they're coming to the table with, we can try these different things.
Also, they see the process of work.
They see that. They also see that the school gets a voice. And exactly what Ross said is that, hey, we spend a ton of time with these kids. We see what they're like first thing in the morning. We see what they're like right before they go home. And being able to say and have that view respected and heard is huge.
The only person that probably knows them better and spends more time with them is their parents.
Sure.
So I mean, it's having the school there is that critical. And I just to address one thing to go back just a minute. One of the things that's a real challenge, our system moves really fast. Things move so quickly. And Chris is talking about these multidisciplinary teams. Sometimes they have to, his staff setting up multiple of them. They're working on this. And sometimes multidisciplinary teams talking about, multiple families, multiple situations. So I guess I would say that one of the things that's really critical of our systems to do is it's not just about the preparation of preparing a family to come and do that. It's how those professionals treat that family from the very moment the meeting starts. It really is engaging them as an expert in their child, not criminalizing them from the jump, right? Not criticizing, not making them feel like a bad parent. Because there's so many different situations.
I just think, what I've heard you all say since the beginning, I know that, it is a very, very scary situation for families, because what we're looking at, as a parent, when we're raising our children, our idea is, how do we successfully get them to the point that they can successfully launch as an adult, where they have the skills, the emotional ability to function as an adult. And when we start butting up against these systems, especially when it's not our choice, right? We're thrown into a system and everything. I think that a couple of things happen naturally as a parent, right? The hairs on the back of your neck naturally stand up because you're terrified, right? It's like somebody thinks that I'm doing something that's jeopardizing the welfare of my child. And for those of us with serious emotional disturbance, the reality most of the time is our children are doing things that are jeopardizing the safety of us and our children. And we're by the time we reach contact with these agencies, we generally are overwhelmed, overstressed. We've reached the end of our parenting handbook. It's like, nothing on. When I'm flipping through the page, it's like there isn't anything on that behavior on how to do this, right? But what I hear you all saying is that as parents, we hear the awful stories about the contact with facts, about the contact with juvenile justice. And that doesn't really serve us well as parents, right? If we can remember when we do have contact with facts and we do have contact with juvenile justice, that they want the same thing, right? They want our children to remain in our home safely and for us to be able to function as a family unit safely. And in order to do that, unfortunately, we have to be extremely vulnerable at times. If you were to show up on my door because somebody observed my child melting down in public and I'm restraining him to keep him from headbutting me and knocking me out, right? Then I need to be able to be very transparent with you and say, this is the reality of what we live with. And I don't have the answers anymore. Like, I am doing the best I can, but my child doesn't have a diagnosis, or my child has this, and that type of thing really leads to the open dialogue where you all then can see the situation and not remove the kids from the home because we are doing what we need to do. And then the extra resources start, if there are available resources, which the Yes System of Care is launching new ones.
I can tell you, as a former clinician, I would say, and you guys probably have a similar experience, at least 50% of the families that came to meet with me had no idea if I was child protection, had no idea if I was like a counselor type, if I was working for a court system, that these families that's how new and how intimidating this is. They just know that it's somebody in authority that I have to go meet with, and that's scary. And they don't know what my role there is. I can't do anything right. I'm just there to say, how can I help you?
Right.
But then there's a court system, the child welfare system. It's all different. And families don't even know that kind of who are you?
Right.
Who am I talking to? Especially with us at Health and Welfare. I mean, with multiple different things, you come in on Health and Welfare, it must be child protection, right?
Right.
So what's going to happen there? So I think us being clear about our roles.
Yeah, so I can jump back to the point you made, because I think it's such an important point a second ago when you talked about it's not so much preparing the parent, but the environment that they walk into. Because having seen it done incredibly well, where there wasn't a lot of information given, and it was a whole group of professionals sitting down, but the facilitator was so trained from the very beginning with the first things that they said, and it was as much reaching out to the parent and looking at them going, man, you look really tired. I can tell that you've been working really hard and you've been doing the best that you can. I just want you to know I get it. Set a tone for that parent that went, and I remember a parent just like breaking down in tears.
Yeah.
That was the first thing said to them. They went, okay, I've got somebody who understands me. So it's the training and I know that the project is doing that, is to make sure that we have really trained facilitators that, with the child and youth, child and family teams. But making sure that is happening in other areas also, that's, being able to make that initial engagement contact that makes the parent feel like, okay, we got you, we understand it's really hard. And the message that we're here to help you. If you can get that tone at the very beginning.
I think that is key, but the bigger piece, and it goes back to the misconceptions, is that we very rarely hear a lot about the horror stories of the different agencies and that you don't get to hear, and we're kind of used to that in this field. We always don't get to hear the high fives. We know them, but we don't get to hear them, and we don't usually get to have people like really kind of raising the flag for us. I think the big thing, and this is one thing that we stress with our probation officers after we do a court multidisciplinary team, is, okay, the talk is great, the follow through has to be there, and it has to be timely. And so I think the big shift that we've done is when we sit there, we start setting the timetables, because I think a lot of these parents that have come in or have been involved in the system for a period of time are used to seeing the ball drop or seeing 2 and 3 weeks down the road and trying to be timely. And now there's only so much that we can control with that, but at least if we're even doing a follow-up phone call to people saying, hey, listen, that referral's in, we're following up, they're saying 4 days, but having that consistent continuum of care and that follow-through piece is important because they're used to being really like pumped up and saying, okay, I'm going to get some help finally. And then the next day and the next day and the next day, and they wait. And so it's making sure that we all know what our assignments are and that we're not duplicating those and that there's follow-through.
And to add on that too, I think, Chris, another essential focus that I think this collaboration has led us to is not setting families up for failure. Because previously you would have parents working a child welfare case plan that would stay, 16 weeks of parenting, and then perhaps you have a kiddo who's on probation and their parents are asked to go to another parenting education or counseling. And then pretty soon you have a family that is so overwhelmed that they can't be successful at anything. So what I've really appreciated about the CMD approach is that everybody is out, everybody has their same outcomes, right? But you're working in collaboration. And it's so amazing to see where you're all coming at the table. And probation may have access to different resources or services for a family than even child welfare does. Or child welfare can say, you know what, we've got that, you do this part of it, and really working better together.
I know this is geared towards families, our webinar today, but I do want to say this to the professionals out there.
Go for it.
Having a family come in and tell their story is really, really traumatic. Having to say that story multiple times, having to talk about if there was an incident where you know things got so out of control that they did you have to physically engage their child. If there was an incident where they had to call law enforcement, I mean, think about veterans that we know in our family that were in you know sort of combat situations. My dad was in Vietnam. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't talk about it. And families go through trauma in their homes. They go through trauma. And us having to have them tell that story over and over and over again, even just setting in that group, that you know, that multidisciplinary team and having this group of professionals and have them, okay, tell us what happened again.
Right.
Tell us in an hour.
Yeah, how intimidating for them, how traumatizing for them.
Well, and the terrifying thing too is when you have had an incident, as a parent, I mean, how many of us who don't have any contact with child welfare actually know what is and what isn't within the, you know, what constitutes abuse? You know, if my child smacks me and all of a sudden I reach up and pop their face, is that abuse? Like, so you're sitting there at the table and you don't know what you've done does and doesn't qualify, and now they're saying, tell me the worst of your worst. So we do have a question from someone, so.
Yeah, and I believe this is towards Misty on what you were just talking about, maybe what Ross was just talking about. What approach did you call that as far as you moving through with parents?
Moving through with parents.
The shift that's occurred in the system, I'm sort of struggling to know exactly what that question is.
Can we get some clarification?
Yeah, Catherine, if you would mind adding a clarifier.
So I think she might have been talking about what,
and it could be the multidisciplinary team.
or with the approach that you take with the families.
Well, while we're looking for clarification, I will just talk a little bit about the future yes system that's coming up. Really, one of the primary foundations of the whole system is built around this child and family team. So we have historically had multidisciplinary teams that sometimes don't include the most important part of the multidisciplinary team, which is the family, right? And if you kind of shift that a little bit, shift your mindset on that a little bit, whether you call it MDT, whether you call it child and family team, you know, certainly we're going to be calling it child and family team because we want it to be known that the child and family are at the center of that team. It's about them, it's for them, and the old slogan, right? Nothing about us without us. It really needs to involve them. So, you know, as that evolves and as we learn more about both the research and just anecdotally how those multidisciplinary teams work, kind of shifting to that philosophical approach to the child and family team. That is the philosophical approach that is the basis for all of our YES system development.
So then how will they still be having multidisciplinary teams with juvenile justice, with kids who are part of the YES system of care, and they'll be doing child family teams, so it will be doubling up on like meetings for parents, or are they going to be kind of integrated together, or is that still yet to be seen?
I think we're still really working on that. You know, we're still working on the child and family team approach, what that looks like, how it's going to be. I mean, quite honestly, how everything, all the way down to how's it reimbursed, right? How do people get paid for it? Right? So we're still working on that. But I think the way our systems work together now, we don't want families to have to go to MDT and have to go to this and have to go to that. We want to be collaborative. We want to work together. One of the approaches, of course, that we're going to be rolling out, already have started rolling out, but you know, not as broadly as we yet want, is wraparound. We talked a little bit about wraparound. Wraparound takes all of that. It brings all of it together. It has a facilitator that really helps set the stage. They communicate with all those team members in advance to prepare them for the meeting. And when we're doing that sort of wraparound team or a child and family team, even we don't have that takes the place of all that. We can use that as the single platform for what we've achieved historically through multiple meetings. But it takes work. it takes, and I'll admit this, you know, our voluntary children's mental health system has, you know, we're referred to, right? And people refer to us from child welfare and from juvenile justice. And they have to have the confidence that they refer to us and that they're willing to say, okay, we're not going to mandate this child and family team of this wraparound approach or this, whatever it is. We have to have confidence that this is going to happen, that families will be engaged, that this is going to occur. Because that's the judges, as Chris talked about, that's judges, that's prosecutors, that's probation officers, it's probation managers, it's all of them. So that's the setting up a new service type, right? Setting up new policies. It's kind of the easy work of yes. The hard part of yes is the culture of the systems. Mm-hmm. That's the real heavy lift that we have in the system, is us working really closely with juvenile justice and child welfare for us to really come together and have a philosophical change in the culture around how we treat families, how we think about families. And the primary purpose of juvenile justice isn't mental health services. No, the primary purpose of child welfare is not mental health services. You know, they have specific purposes. But what they recognize, I think, and certainly, you know, these two wonderful people here, but what they recognize is by using that approach, a teaming approach, it's going to be more effective in doing what they're legally mandated to do. Community protection, protecting kids' safety. So, but by us doing this sort of approach, I think we all recognize the benefit of it.
This is one of the challenges will be is that probation is county to county. So in terms of shifting the culture, you almost have to go like county to county in terms of the judges and their system and getting their buy-in, being that it's not a state system. You can't have someone at the very top say, we're implementing this new philosophy and we want you all on board, is that it kind of has to grow. And I mean, Chris, do you have any thoughts on like, what does that look like across the state?
You know, I don't think that we're very fortunate in Ada County because we have a lot of resources here. And I think that that's probably one of the bigger differences between us and the other counties is that we're very fortunate that we have this infrastructure that fits very well. As far as the other counties, they have issues in that. And I think until we can maybe bridge some of that, it's going to continue to be a problem for them. But I don't think you would have, and of course there's all the probation administrators. I don't think that anybody is against what we're talking about here. I think everybody supports that and wants to see that. The ability to be able to deliver on that is one of those things where we've just got to see, and again, it's going to be county to county, town to town, figuring out, do we have the ability to get these services for these kids? But I think the philosophy is there. We all understand why we're in this business and why we do what we do. And again, we aren't designed for mental health. I think there's been a lot of misnomers of get your child involved in the juvenile justice system so that they can get the help they need. We need to educate a lot of people that can happen without bringing a kid in. And that will help the court, that will help the parents. Ultimately, it's just a better system of care.
Now there's 44 counties, right? 44 counties to work with, to your point, Harold. And how many? 160 independent school and independent education areas, right? I mean, that's a lot of different systems to engage. So you can see why this is literally taking years for us to try this rollout on a statewide basis. We're a little bit fortunate in that, you know, our child welfare system and our children's mental health system, we're state run. Right. So I can actually tell my staff in, you know, particular area of the state what to do. But there's nothing that, you know, the Department of Juvenile Corrections, they can't tell Chris and his staff what to do. So it really is engaging in a collaborative way between the different entities that exist out there.
We do have a polling question that just went live, so if you're all on WebEx and want to participate, please go ahead and do that. And just as a parent, I think one of the things for parents to realize too is that we play an important role in how the system develops. One of the things that I've seen in the 3 years that I've been doing this is the power of your personal story, right? When you can find the strength to be vulnerable enough to tell your story, which is traumatic and it is difficult, but to tell it to the professionals who are dealing with your children in a way that helps them understand what you can't possibly understand if you've never raised a child with a serious emotional disturbance, right? I can't expect any of you to understand when you see my life from the outside, what I'm actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And by sharing my personal story and helping you all understand and see what I deal with on a day-to-day basis and what resources we've tried and what things we've tried to do, it really does help other professionals accept you as that professional at the table, because it doesn't take many stories for someone to realize I never had to deal with anything like that. Like, it builds the admiration and the trust with the family. But there's a lot of vulnerability that comes along with that, particularly when you are sitting in a room with, juvenile justice and facts, when you're thinking, gosh, if I tell this wrong, but just realizing there is no wrong way. Ultimately, everybody seated at the table is there to help you. And if it does go south, there are other resources, right? Call Carol.
That's a great question. So if it does go south, if you feel like as a parent for the area of the state that you are living in, that you're not getting heard, and you're not getting recognized in terms of what the needs of the child are and how it's impacting, how their mental health issues are impacting their behavior and the community that's getting in front of the judge, or the calls that are being made on the referrals. What do parents do? Who do they reach out to be able to say, what Janet's talking about, this is going south, it's not working, I'm not getting heard, I'm not getting understood. It's a different problem than what's being presented.
Sure, so just in reference to what you were saying to earlier, I think it's so important for parents when they do find their voice to really advocate for themselves too, which I know is easy. I mean, you've been advocating all along, right? But to really, don't be afraid to say to professionals, I tried that. That didn't work. We do not know your families like you do. We don't live, we don't breathe what you've been going through. So in our best effort to help families, oftentimes we'll say, you need to do this, you need to do that. We should be a part of that, team, but we should not be directing you at what we think will work for your family.
So if as a parent, I am involved in the system, right? And maybe there's a professional at the table that they don't get the philosophical shift, right? We hit one of those pockets where it's very old school. And are there options? I mean, obviously they can call the Federation of Families and let Carol know kind of what their situation and what's going on, and she may have resources. But in the moment, like when they're in those meetings, is there something that they can do? Or maybe after the meeting's over, is there something that they can call and say, hey, I'm really feeling like it's really going south and I'm not sure what to do because I don't, what they're perceiving as the issue isn't at all what I'm perceiving as the issue.
Sure, so if a child welfare is involved and we have a case manager that's at the table that perhaps is not working as family-centered approach as we would hope or expect, we would want that parent to call and speak with that child welfare supervisor or talk to the centralized intake and express some concerns. We often to ask families, give them the resources for navigation and 211. An effort when we do hear those stories about, I cannot bring my kiddo home because of my other kiddos.
Right.
But I have a family member who my child could stay with, but that family member may not have the resources or the financial ability. So the first thing we'll do is say, let's try to help you get that kiddo over with a family member so that you can protect that kid, but continue to protect the other children that are in your home.
It's important to know child abuse is real.
Absolutely.
Right.
There really is child abuse that occurs. There really is kids out there that are involved in really scary criminal behavior. And their systems have to balance all of that, right? They are trying to help families. But some families, and we're not judging, I think child welfare does a pretty good job of they try not to blame the parent. Who knows what caused that? Who knows what sort of addiction that parent's dealing with that caused neglect or something? So they have to filter through all of that, and that's the basis for their systems: protecting kids, protecting community, and so we have to know that all of those things are here. All of those are present in their daily work,
and it's very hard for them to go into a family's house. I mean, I would think,
Scary.
I would think there'd be a lot of times that it's quite scary, but a lot of times too where your basic assumption is that the chances are very good that there was abuse that went on here. For somebody to the outside, it frequently looks like a child with a mental health disorder is potentially in one of those situations. And it must be hard to figure out. It must take some training and effort to be able to discern, is this an abusive situation? Is this a mental health situation? Is it maybe both? Mm-hmm. Is it none of the above? And it was, an overly cautious citizen, right?
Sorry, well, and I don't have the exact numbers with me, but I can tell you most of our reports are unfounded. Mm-hmm. So it really, not to go against child abuse happens on a daily basis in our community. However, that most of them are unfounded.
I think that's so helpful for parents to hear, right? You're not alone. When fact shows up on your doorstep or interviews your child, it's happened to hundreds, thousands of other families, and it's been unfounded. So you do have the opportunity to be open and honest about the situation in your family without them saying, well, you're the worst parent in the world. We're taking your kids away, right? I think that's
the worst place.
Right. In your mind as a parent, that's absolutely where you jump. You see facts on your doorstep and you think, my kids are going away, or I'm going to lose my job, or it's worst case scenario in your head, and you're predisposed to be there if you're a child with a serious emotional disturbance. It's just, that's the life you live every day anyway, is worst case scenarios.
I think it was touched upon, but training is so important, and I know that staff love it and they hate it.
Right.
Caseloads just are crazy. They want training, but then they're like, oh my God, I want training. But that's what it's about, is being able to have a core of professionals that can go in there and can assess the situation and know, okay, I can see this, I can see where the parent's at. And I think that we've all had that experience and are able to kind of vet out what those situations look like. I think that we're seeing a lot of those calls go in because there's a lot of people that are mandatory reporters, and that duty to warn is very important. And I think it's probably saved a lot of children out there. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, I know we have a lot of times where, based on what our duty to warn is that we have to call that in, but we probably know that, and we've got to trust. They know how to assess the situation, and if they feel like it's not there, then we just continue on with our job, but we've covered ourselves.
Well, I think part of it too is that there are people out there that have a duty to warn that at times some people prefer not to ask the question. Like it could be a mental health disorder, but they don't want to ask the question, so they'll call and report and let somebody else investigate. And that's obviously
time and time again for the same family. So there's instance families, and we have some that are just so frequently reported that they're kind of on a first name basis with that.
Well, I always think of the really sad situations. You're talking about how scary it is for somebody show up and then being worried about their kid getting taken away. How sad is it? Because we also run into families that's a point of relief.
Right.
This has been such a struggle for them for like, well, good, because I can't do this anymore. Yeah. So that's the saddest situation. Man, we got to get those families help earlier, where they can lead that help. They don't have to have it forced on them, where they can be a part of it, they can lead it, they can drive it. Because when it gets to that point, man, what those families have had to go through.
Well, and oftentimes those are cases where they have other kids in the home, and it's nobody wants to be put in the situation of sacrifice one for the other.
Right.
And I feel like we have a lot of families that come in, CMDTs and stuff, where they're in that position, and it's just heart-wrenching.
And well, as families, you have to make that decision. Every day I had to decide how much of what I am going to do today is going to be devoted to taking care of my child with a severe developmental disability, to give her the chance to be the most functional adult she can be. How much of it is going to be, my son's mental illness that we didn't really even acknowledge was a mental illness, right? There's that juggling that goes on within our families. But I think one of the greatest things about the redesign of the system here, and I want families to know about this if they don't already, is if you suspect your child has a mental health disorder, you can call Liberty Healthcare. You can get a CANS, which is a full, complete diagnostic and functional impairment assessment that will get you access to a lot of the services and supports early that can help your family function better. The system is, not everything's out there yet, right, Ross? But we've got service coordination coming. We have new services and supports that are coming for families that, the hope is that we will help families early because that will create a sustainable system. It will prevent more families from getting into crisis.
Well, you don't enter through these doors.
Right.
We get to that point. Yeah, because so often I think what parents do is they really try to shield their kid for as long as possible. That things, we can contain it, we can control it, it's not so bad, and then things just blow up, and they end up in court, or they end up with child protective services knocking on the door. So if they knew that it was available earlier,
It becomes their norm.
Right. Well,
Right?
and
I mean, this is their norm. This
right.
is what they do with every day. Maybe they don't know that it's not normal.
right. Well, I didn't.
Maybe they don't know, right?
I didn't. It was my version. I lived it 20 years, and my version of normal was, was that every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really important for families to realize that there is hope.
So the system that you all talked about, yeah, it's not done.
Right.
More's coming tomorrow, but there's a system in place today that's ready to help people. Going through the independent assessor, that's a doorway into the system. As much as we don't want families to have to go through these two doors, they are doorways. They can get help through these systems. We can't always control the doorway that people come through. What we need to make sure is that doorway helps direct them to the right hallway
Right.
behind there, right? And that hallway can connect them to services and supports that are going to help their needs. I to sort of go back to the treatment's available and treatment works. It does. It's going to get better. We're going to have more. We're still evolving. It's not done. But there is a system in place now that's prepared to help people.
And Ross, you can speak to the numbers, but for parents, we isolate, right? When our family dynamics become different from the dynamics that we grew up with, from the dynamics of our friends and our neighbors, we isolate. It's our natural tendency, especially with mental health issues, because there has been historically such a stigma around it. But roughly how many parents or how many children do we think are in the state of Idaho that are going to be eligible for the YES system of care that would qualify?
It's always difficult to know, but based off the estimates we have, there's probably 20,000 kids in Idaho that have a serious emotional disturbance that need services through the public system. The other thing is that, what you were just saying is, I can tell you, I have kids. I have a whole new set of families that I hang out with now, right? We have a tendency to hang out with the kids with the families who our kids are friends with and that sort of thing. Well, imagine if your kid doesn't have it. That's your
Right.
isolation thing.
Absolutely.
My child doesn't have friends. They're not involved in sports. They're not doing this stuff. That's why we need families. That's why it's so important what you guys are doing, connecting families so they do have a support. They have somebody they can talk to about what they're going through. It doesn't have to be so isolated.
So if you're a family and you don't have a support system, call Carol at the Idaho Federation of Families. She'll get you in contact with other families in your region. We have parents throughout the state, and I can tell you it's been one of the greatest reliefs and learning experiences of my life to sit down with other parents and talk with them about what it's like to raise a child with a serious emotional disturbance. And they have resources because other parents have walked this journey. Other parents have entered through this door, right? So there are other parents that have walked that part of the journey before you. So there's information out there that's available, and that's helpful and empowering for families.
Right. So we have 2 minutes left. So first thing you need to know, are we doing well as far as we need to do our survey? Is that already been done? Okay, thank you very much. For those of you that participated, it's really valuable information for us. We do a lot of data collection. We then have to flip back to how we make decisions and our funding and so forth. So please participate in those. Again, your information and feedback is really important. In closing, things that we asked or we gave suggestions to parents in terms of how to engage and how maybe when things happen and child welfare ends up in the door. Anything that you would want parents to know, like a couple of nuggets to take away from their involvement they may have with your system, that would pop back, all of a sudden someone was knocking on the door, these are the things that you want them to remember?
Sure, again, I think that piece of being vulnerable, right, and forthcoming with, this is the situation that occurred, and here are the resources or services I've tried. Here are some techniques that I've tried, and really, which is difficult, but really that vulnerability and saying, this is what's going on, and can you help me? And how can you help provide some resources or services to my family? That, at the end of the day, again, child welfare wants to ensure children's safety, but we understand that families take care of kiddos better than what our system does.
So it's kind of like lean into a little bit and make requests, ask for what you need instead of backing out and being defensive. If there's stuff going on and you need some help, then ask for it.
Absolutely.
Okay, and it may be that you have to link them to the other agency that really provides services. Okay, Chris, how about for you? What would you like?
You know, I think the big piece for us is when in doubt, ask questions. I think that there are enough people out there that they might not be able to answer it, but they can always point you in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where our message about what we do and what we're about is so important. You know, we have a website. Everybody here has websites, but we try to put as much information up on our website so that people can get a good understanding of what we're about. So I would just encourage people to take a look at that.
Okay. And Ross, what do you want to tell families?
I just want to say thanks. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Thanks to Misty. Thanks to Chris. Really wonderful to have them involved. So thanks for inviting me. Anything we can do.
Well, we're going to invite you back in January because we're going to bring back State Department of Education and developmental disabilities and kind of have the same conversation. Because again, I think it's so important to recognize that it is a philosophical shift. Agencies are really trying to work together to understand so parents are not having to jump from one silo to another silo to another silo. That sense that if it's pulled together, information is shared among agencies, and plans are made together, it just serves the families so much better. And that's what they continue to tell us. So yeah, please come back. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us. We really appreciate your information, and look forward to seeing you all again. Janet, as always, we love having you.